Good morning, I'm Diane Smith, and welcome to this Friday edition of Morning Update. It's June 10th. Today we're taking a look back at the 2011 session. Here's a quick recap. Among the major bills that passed, mandatory paid sick leave for service industry employees and companies with more than 50 workers, Governor Malloy's $864 million plan to expand the Yukon Health Center and establish a bioscience initiative in Connecticut, major reform of Connecticut's energy policy, including the creation of the new Department of Energy and Environmental Protection known as Dept, the decriminalization of less than a half ounce of marijuana, the addition of gender identity and gender expression to Connecticut's anti-discrimination laws, and of course the main priority of the session, a new 2-year state budget signed into law, though union ratification of the concessions agreement is still pending. Among the bills that did not make it this session, the repeal of Connecticut's death penalty, medical marijuana, the prohibition of captive audience meetings, the Sunday sales of alcohol, a change in qualifications in order to run for Attorney General in the state of Connecticut, and bringing back highway tolls. While members of the House and Senate are no doubt resting up this morning after putting in some long hours during this legislative session, I took the opportunity yesterday to speak with the House and Senate Democratic and Republican leaders to get their take on the session that officially closed midnight Wednesday. Here's what Senate President Don Williams and House Speaker Chris Donovan had to say. So thanks for joining us. You both seem to have held up pretty well during this session, looking healthy and all that.
Ma'am.
The Democrats have had a majority for a while in both chambers, but was it different this year because you had a Democrat in office, Don?
You know, absolutely.
As governor,
it made a tremendous amount of difference having Governor Malloy leading the state. That's what a governor should do. When he proposed his budget, it was bold, it was courageous, it gave us a framework to work with. He didn't walk away from it and disappear. He came and worked with us. There was a lot of collaboration. So having true leadership in the governor's office makes a tremendous difference. That's why we accomplished so much.
Mr. Speaker, a lot of people said that he worked at a pace like nobody's ever seen before, that he has two speeds, fast and off, and things went at breakneck speed. Did it affect how things processed through your house?
I think it was great. A lot of the issues that he was for, we were for, and actually Don and I had worked on in the last number of years, so we were ready. Mm-hmm. The energy bill that we had passed several times, only to be vetoed by the previous governor. Health care reform that we had passed, only to be vetoed by the previous governor. We had a head start on him, so the fact that he was fast, he caught up to us, and we worked together.
Since you mentioned health care, let me talk to you about that. Did you get everything you were hoping for? You were really a big proponent of health care pooling and a number of other things. Right. Did you get what you wanted?
Well, pretty much. There's still more to do, but again, we had bills vetoed before, and this year, now we're going to open up the state health care plan to municipalities so they can save money. Then after that, open up to nonprofits so they can save money. And eventually, I'll be working with the governor next year to open up to small businesses. We also set us up, we called this thing the Healthcare Exchange, which has our state get ready for when Affordable Health Care Act kicks in. We'll be ready to offer small businesses real choice in health care. We passed a bill that will call for hearings when insurance companies come in with high rate requests. We looked after patients to make sure that if they're approved for care, they get that care. The insurance companies can't come in and then say, oh, now we're not going to pay for it. So we did a whole lot in terms of health care, and it's going to help small businesses, help the patients back home, and help our cities and towns.
Senator, when you do things like that affect the insurance companies, let's face it, we're in Hartford. Does that get some pushback from the insurance giants that are headquartered here?
Well, everybody wants to save costs. Everybody wants to make sure that when it comes to our businesses, especially small businesses, that insurance is affordable. And our insurance companies don't want to be priced out of the market. So I think there's common ground in terms of providing quality healthcare insurance and doing it in a way that's affordable. And now we're all at the table working toward that goal. We also passed legislation that's going to help the insurance industry and the financial services industry by focusing on that sector of our economy, knowing that it's very important to us, not only in Hartford with the insurance companies, but in Fairfield County with the financial services that provide so much in terms of jobs, but also revenue and income to the state.
Senator, you brought up jobs, and of course during the campaigns this past fall, including the national campaigns, the congressional campaigns, we heard jobs, 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 jobs. The Republicans would say that some of the bills that were passed this year are anti-business and are not going to create jobs, but may discourage jobs.
Well, what I would say to them, and we know that the Republicans were shocked by this, the business leaders of the state didn't line up behind the Republicans. They lined up behind the Democrats, the Democratic legislature, and Governor Malloy and his budget. We had the Fairfield County Business Council support the Democrats and our budget. The Bridgeport Business Council support the Democrats and our budget. Business leaders of the top corporations here in the city of Hartford lined up not behind the Republicans, but behind the Democrats and our budget. And part of the reason is not just the budget, but Governor Malloy and legislative Democrats had a vision for jobs and economic growth. We know we've got to shake things up. People are hurting on Main Street. Families, small businesses are hurting because of this recession. They don't want us to stand still, as the Republicans would have us do. That's why we're building on a research triangle in this state. What's already happened at Yale with the ties to the private sector and biotech and pharmacies and the jobs created. Now we're going to expand on that in Farmington with the UConn Health Center, our medical school, more space for research and development, and out at UConn, the Storrs campus, a research and development technology park. The jobs of the future are going to be created in the cutting edge sectors. And by taking bold action, Democrats have said to the state of Connecticut, we're not going to stand still. We're going to shake things up and create those jobs of the future.
Mr. Speaker, some of the things that the Republicans would criticize, though, that they would say were anti-business were things like the paid sick leave measure. What's your response to that?
We're talking about a few days a year when you're sick. Diane, we get sick, right? And what kind of job is it where if you're sick or your kid's sick, you have to stay home and not get paid for it? I mean, we're talking about good jobs. And, and when I talk to people in the businesses, a huge proportion provide some kind of leave, whether it's personal leave, sick leave, vacation time, something. We're talking about people who have nothing, no leave, no obstacles. And they have to earn it. People have to earn it. And so it's really not a burden on most businesses. They provide it already. So we're just saying we think when we're talking about jobs, and the Senate President talked about all the jobs we're talking about and creating, we want to make sure that the people who have those jobs have a decent care when they get sick.
And let's talk now about some of the other issues that don't have anything to do with jobs, necessarily with the economy. Let's talk about the things like medical marijuana and decriminalization of marijuana. Don, those are bills that have come up time and time again. Decriminalization went through. Medical marijuana was kind of stalled, although I guess there's going to be a study on it.
Well, right. So what is law is decriminalization, not making it legal. Let's underline that. But bringing the penalties more into line with other similar offenses. If you have a 19-year-old who's caught with a single beer, we're not going to say the appropriate penalty is up to 1 year in jail. That we wouldn't do that. If you have an underage person gambling, we wouldn't say that the penalty is up to 1 year in jail. Doesn't make sense. Even though alcohol can be addictive, it can lead to a destruction of lives. The same thing is true with gambling. The same thing is true to a certain extent with marijuana, but certainly with other drugs. So we're not decriminalizing it, but possession of a small amount is still going to be a crime. And folks are going to pay about $260 with the fine and the fees for a first offense, over $500 for a second offense, and then back to the old penalty for a third offense. But time in jail should be reserved for violent criminals. We should be devoting the resources of our criminal justice system to putting violent criminals behind bars, not using taxpayer money to put people in jail potentially up to a year for a minor offense comparable to those examples that I gave you. So this is common sense. The polling shows that people support common sense, not making it legal, but making these penalties on a par with similar offenses.
Mr. Speaker, while we're talking about issues of police and crime, what about the failure of the death penalty to be repealed this year? There was clearly a very strong feeling that had to do with Dr. Pettit, his family, and those two people who are accused of that crime. Will the death penalty repeal come back next year, and will it have a chance?
You know, last year there was enough votes in the House and Senate to repeal the death penalty. It was vetoed by then Governor Rell. Governor Dan Malloy said he would support it. Unfortunately, the votes just weren't there this year. So I think, you know, it's an emotional issue, it's a religious issue, it's a political issue. And legislators, we're like everybody else, we have our opinions on it. And I guess some people decided they weren't ready to vote for it this year or repeal, and we'll just have to see how people think about it as the years move on.
Let's spend our last 2 minutes talking about the budget and specifically the union concessions, because that's the piece that has to come through in order for the whole budget to work. Senator, I don't even want to think about what happens if it doesn't get ratified, but there was an issue this week where OFA, which is nonpartisan, said they can't verify all the savings, that they don't have enough information. Does that concern you as you're going out of session now?
Well, a $1.6 billion package is a lot to get your arms around very quickly. So I would like greater clarity on that. But, you know, I look at what the governor was able to accomplish with the union leaders. And I'm proud for the state of Connecticut, proud because folks stepped up. I think the union leaders did a tremendous job on behalf of their membership. And I think the governor did a tremendous job. It is truly the shared sacrifice. And that $1 billion, $1.6 billion is far greater than any governor has ever achieved. So that is a key part of the budget. But also people have to remember, in this budget, there are no gimmicks. There's no borrowing. We didn't go down the path that Republican governors have gone down, and quite frankly, legislative Republicans this session would have taken us down. More gimmicks, more borrowing. That's not in the budget.
Mr. Speaker, back in the fall for a special session on jobs. Governor mentioned that last night. Was that a surprise?
Well, I guess that's the first we heard of it. But you know, again, you said he's fast mode. We're ready to go with him. You know, I was saying this morning that, you know, we focused on, and Don mentioned, we're looking at healthcare, research, bioscience, etc., as one avenue we looked at this year. Those are interesting jobs. Those are good jobs. Jobs that reflect where we want to go in the future for our families and generations to come. Energy is another area we focus on. We passed the energy bill after some attempts in the past. Again, looking at new innovative ways to fund and provide energy for our communities. Very exciting jobs. That's two places where I think we're very excited about where we're going in terms of new jobs. There are other opportunities out there, so I look forward to sitting down with the governor, my colleagues, and coming up with some other good ideas.
Well, thank you both for being with us, and we'll see you in September, if not before.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Diane.
Diane.
And I also invited Senate Minority Leader John McKinney and House Minority Leader Larry Cafero to review the legislative session. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. It's very good to see you, and you survived the session. I know there were some difficult moments, but you're both looking pretty hale and hearty in spite of it. I want to ask you about the fact that the two of you have faced Democratic majorities for the last several years in both chambers. Still, was it different? Was the dynamic different this year because of a Democratic governor? And I'll start with you, Mr. Cafero.
Yeah, of course it was. The first time in a generation, literally, we've had a Democratic governor, and therefore the first time in a generation we've had one-party government. Obviously, the governor being Democrat, overwhelming majorities in both the House and the Senate are Democrat. So it was a very, very different dynamic. But, you know, even that said, and as corny as it sounds, when there is a new governor, it's like a fresh start. Mm-hmm. And even though Governor Malloy was a Democrat and we're Republicans, I think we were optimistic. You know, we're Connecticut residents first. And we're hopeful when you listen to Governor Malloy. I remember saying to John, and John and I both in his opening day speech were like, oh, we like this guy. We like what he's saying. He sounded very commonsensical. He was great. And then he did what he did. And it was what I think the theme here of this session is broken promises, what he said and yet what he did. And that was what's so disappointing and disheartening.
John, I know a number of times when you had various press conferences or when he had an opportunity to speak one-on-one, you said that you felt you were shut out of the process. And one of the things both of you said to me on Inauguration Day and Opening Day was that this looked like it was going to be an opportunity for everyone to participate.
Well, the governor said a good idea is a good idea, and it's a line I've used throughout my